He said it so casually, like slashing 12 years of my work, my sacrifices, and every animal I'd ever fought to save was nothing more than a cost-efficiency adjustment. I sat there listening to a stranger tell me my value on a spreadsheet, as if the families who trusted me didn't matter at all. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly see, was that I wasn't as powerless as he assumed. If you've ever been pushed aside by someone who thought they owned you, subscribe and share your story in the comments. I'm listening. I used to believe that a life built on loyalty would protect me. For 12 years, Cedar Grove Animal Wellness Center wasn't just where I worked. It was where I grew up, where I learned what kind of veterinarian I wanted to be, and where the people around me slowly became family. Every morning I walked into that worn brick building in Boulder, the scent of disinfectant mixing with the sweet smell of dog treats, and something in my chest would settle. This place mattered to me. I mattered to this place. I treated kittens through their first vaccines, watched them grow into seniors with cloudy eyes and stiff joints. I'd held trembling hands as beloved pets slipped away, and I'd celebrated miraculous turnarounds that made entire families cry with relief. Over the years, I'd collected drawings from kids who colored me next to their dogs with giant smiles, and I taped their scribbles along the wall behind my desk because it reminded me why people trusted me. I wasn't paid extra for staying late during emergencies or for crawling onto the floor during exams because a terrified rescue dog couldn't bear being lifted onto the table or for making late-night phone calls just to reassure someone that their senior cat's breathing was still normal. But the gratitude I received instead, the relieved hugs, the handwritten cards, the little bags of homemade cookies, those things meant more to me than any line item on a paycheck. Before corporate ever showed up, Cedar Grove had a heartbeat. We laughed, we argued, we teased each other about our terrible lunches and our broken-down cars. Tessa, our senior tech, knew every client by name and remembered their pets' birthdays better than her own. Dr. Amir Lawson could calm even the wildest dog with that low, soothing voice of his. Ruby at the front desk ran the place like it was her personal kingdom, greeting every animal with a treat and every person with the kind of warmth that made them forget they were in a medical office. And then there were my clients, my people. They came to me because I took the time to explain things in English, not medical jargon. Because I never rushed them. Because they knew I wouldn't recommend anything I wouldn't do for my own animals. They trusted me and I never took that lightly. Maybe that's why I didn't see the danger coming. Maybe that's why, when Dr. Whitford retired after 35 years and sold the clinic to a regional chain called CareSpan Health, I convinced myself it wouldn't change anything important. They promised to preserve our culture, Dr. Whitford had said over coffee, his voice gentle but tired. They want what we built here. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So when the new regional director, a man named Victor Brandt, sent out an introductory email announcing his arrival, I didn't think much of it at first. I didn't know that the world I loved, the world I thought was safe, was already gone. The day Victor Brandt arrived, the air inside the clinic felt wrong before he even opened his mouth. He walked in wearing a slate suit that probably cost more than my month's mortgage, tapping a tablet like he was already bored. Ruby tried to greet him with her usual warmth, but he barely nodded, eyes already sweeping the lobby with the cold efficiency of someone appraising assets, not people. I should have known then. I should have understood what was coming, but nothing prepared me for how fast he would move or how effortlessly he would try to dismantle the life I'd built. He called me into his office. Well, technically Dr. Whitford's old office, but it already looked like something out of a corporate catalog. All the framed photos of our original staff were gone, replaced with abstract art and a motivational canvas that said, "Efficiency is care." When I stepped inside, Victor didn't stand or smile. He just gestured to the chair across from him like he was seating a witness. "Georgia," he said, tapping the side of his tablet, "we need to discuss your compensation." No warm-up, no acknowledgement of my 12 years, nothing human. He slid a digital chart toward me. "We completed a system-wide audit," he said. "Your salary is 35% above regional benchmarks." I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard him. Above benchmarks because I've been here over a decade, I said carefully. I helped build this place. He looked up at me for the first time, and there wasn't a hint of recognition in his eyes, not of my work, my history, or my worth. Loyalty doesn't determine compensation, he said. Market alignment does. Effective next pay period, your salary will be reduced by 35%. And then, as if he were doing me a favor, we need your decision by Friday. My mouth went dry. You're cutting my pay immediately, without any performance review? This isn't personal, he said. It's business. The words hit me harder than the pay cut. Not personal? My entire life was tied to this place. Every night I spent comforting scared owners, every weekend emergency I handled without question, every memory taped to my office wall, none of it meant anything to him. But the real humiliation came next. He moved on from my future as if it were an administrative chore and added, also, training for the new scheduling software goes live Monday. The packet's in your inbox. I felt heat flood my face, not from anger yet, but from the shock of being treated like someone disposable, someone replaceable. Victor, I said, trying to steady my voice, I've dedicated 12 years to this clinic. He didn't look up. And we appreciate your service. Service? Like I was an appliance reaching the end of its warranty. I walked out of that office in a fog, but the humiliation didn't fade. It intensified when I reached the front desk. Ruby's expression said everything before she spoke. You too? She whispered. I nodded. 35%. Mine's 25, she said, eyes glistening, and they're cutting my hours. I looked around the lobby, the same place where we'd built relationships with families for years. There was a veteran with his old shepherd lying across his boots, a mother with a nervous terrier pressed against her chest, a little boy holding his cat wrapped in a blanket. They weren't line items, they weren't metrics, they were people who trusted us. Victor didn't see any of that. He couldn't. But that humiliation, that disrespect, did something inside me, something sharp and steady. By the time I walked back to my exam room, the shame had evaporated and been replaced by a quiet, controlled anger. Not the kind that lashes out, but the kind that plans. Victor thought he was adjusting payroll. What he'd really done was turn every hour of loyalty I'd given this place into fuel. He thought I was going to choose between a gutted salary or blind obedience. He didn't realize I wasn't trapped. Not yet. Not ever. And while he was counting dollars on his tablet, something far more dangerous was already forming in the back of my mind, something he wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. The morning after Victor delivered his little market realignment speech, the clinic felt different, like someone had lowered the oxygen without telling us. Everyone moved quietly, cautiously, as if the wrong word might trigger another cost-cutting decree. I tried to focus on my patients, but the tension wrapped around the building like a storm cloud waiting to split open. When I finally sat down for lunch, Amir slid into the seat across from me with the kind of expression that told me he had bad news. You worked at a CareSpan clinic before, right? I asked. He nodded slowly. 3 years. He didn't have to say the rest, but he did because he knew I needed to hear it. It always starts with pay cuts, he said. Then hours, then metrics. They track everything you do. Appointment length, number of tests ordered, average revenue per pet. They want you to push procedures even when they're unnecessary. I frowned. They can't force us to upsell medical care. They don't say it outright, he replied, picking at his sandwich. They call it care optimization. But if you don't follow the protocol, they make your life hell. I felt a tightness in my chest. You left because of that? I left because I couldn't sleep at night. His voice was quiet, but the weight of it was heavy enough to settle in my bones. After lunch, I went back to my exam rooms, trying to shake off the dread curling inside me. But the confirmation came faster than I expected. When I opened my email, a new document awaited. Updated care standards and wellness protocol. I clicked through the pages, my stomach dropping with each line. Vaccinations were now paired with add-on screenings. Senior exams required mandatory premier panels, regardless of the animal's condition. monthly dental cleanings for breeds prone to tartar buildup, even if their last cleaning was spotless. This wasn't medicine, it was sales, pure sales. The worst part came when I walked past the supply closet and overheard Tessa talking with one of the junior techs. "They want us to pitch the Gold Wellness Bundle to everyone," she whispered, frustration lacing her words. "Even healthy pets, even puppies." The junior tech sighed. "I didn't go into veterinary care to sell packages." Neither did I. That afternoon, I met with one of my longtime clients, Mrs. Calloway, who brought in her senior retriever, Daisy, for a routine arthritis check. Daisy had been stable for months. Under the new protocol, I was supposed to order a $480 panel she absolutely didn't need. When I gently explained we could wait a few more months, relief softened Mrs. Calloway's face. But before she even made it to the front desk, Victor appeared, smiling that polished, scripted smile that never reached his eyes. He circled back with her, emphasizing early detection benefits, sprinkling in horror stories of missed conditions, and dangling a limited-time price reduction that still cost more than her groceries for a week. By the time she left, she looked stressed and guilty, not reassured. Victor caught my eye as she walked out, his expression sharp and satisfied. "Compliance with the protocol is mandatory," he said. "Your emotional attachments are clouding your judgment." I almost laughed. My judgment, the same judgment families trusted for 12 years, was suddenly an obstacle to their revenue targets. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. The betrayal of the pay cut had stunned me. This, watching him prey on worried owners, lit a fire in me that felt deeper, stronger, and far more dangerous. He thought he was tightening control. In reality, he was pushing me toward a line he never expected me to cross. That night, after Victor's little display of corporate manipulation, I drove home in silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, suffocating kind that makes every streetlight feel like it's judging you. I walked into my kitchen, dropped my keys on the counter, and just stood there, staring at the fridge covered in drawings, from kids whose pets I'd treated. Crooked hearts, stick-figure dogs, handwritten notes that said, "Thank you, Dr. Georgia," in messy crayon. I'd earned every one through years of listening, caring, and refusing to rush people out the door. And now some stranger in a tailored suit thought he could reduce all of that to a protocol compliance metric. I sat down at the table with a mug of coffee that went cold before I even tasted it. My mind kept circling the same question like a trapped bird slamming against a window. How long could I survive in a place that was no longer mine? I picked up my phone and stared at Dr. Whitford's name for a long time before I finally pressed call. He answered on the second ring, voice warm as ever. "Georgia, how's my old crew holding up?" I hesitated, then I told him the truth. All of it. The pay cuts, the forced upselling, the scripted pressure tactics, the way Victor hovered like a warden keeping score of our worth. When I finished, there was a long silence. "I didn't know," he said finally. "They promised me. They swore. They'd protect the clinic's values." "You couldn't have known," I said softly. "You trusted them." "But you don't," he replied. "And you shouldn't." I took a breath. I've been thinking, maybe it's time to build something new, something that stays true to what we started. I expected him to warn me how hard it would be, to tell me about long nights and loans and the endless obstacles of opening a practice from scratch. Instead, he said, with absolute conviction, "You should do it. Boulder needs someone who still believes care comes before profit." After we hung up, I sat there alone, the weight of the decision pressing against me like a hand between my shoulder blades. But underneath the fear, underneath the exhaustion, there was something else rising. Purpose. Not rage, not revenge. Purpose. I kept replaying the moments that mattered. Daisy's relieved sigh when I rubbed the spot behind her ear, the little boy laughing as his kitten climbed my sleeve, the way Mrs. Davidson hugged me in the parking lot last winter after her beagle finally recovered. They didn't come to Cedar Grove because of the building or the brand. They came because of trust. They came because of me. I couldn't let Victor strip that away. Later that evening, as I was finishing up notes from my last two appointments, I heard soft footsteps behind me. It was Tessa. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Is it true?" she whispered. "The pay cuts, the targets, all of it?" I nodded. She exhaled hard. "If you ever—" She paused, glancing down the hall to make sure we were alone. "If you ever choose to leave, tell me. I'm not staying here to push tests on people who can't afford them." I stared at her, stunned. "You'd follow me?" "Georgia," she said, "you're the only reason half the families trust this place." After she left, I opened my laptop and typed in a search I never thought I'd make. Commercial properties for lease Boulder veterinary zoning. It felt surreal, reckless, impossible, and yet, I kept scrolling. One listing grabbed me immediately, a former pediatric clinic on Maple Ridge Parkway, already zoned for medical. Exam rooms intact, sunny lobby, plenty of parking. I imagined it with new paint, updated equipment, the smell of fresh coffee, the quiet hum of a space built for comfort rather than quotas. I imagined clients walking through the door, knowing they were seen, not assessed. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a sudden clarity so sharp it almost hurt. I couldn't save Cedar Grove from Victor, but I could save what it meant. I could carry its heart somewhere else. By the time midnight rolled around, my decision was no longer a maybe. It was a promise, a quiet vow to myself and to every family who trusted me. I wasn't going to let corporate greed rewrite my worth. I was going to build something they could never take from me. The next morning, I walked into Cedar Grove feeling like someone who was already halfway gone, even if no one else knew it yet. But Victor must have sensed something, because he was suddenly everywhere. He lingered in doorways, hovered behind me during exams, asked pointed questions about my workflow efficiency, as if compassion were a measurable number he could dock from my performance. Every time I spoke to a client, his eyes tracked me like he was waiting for evidence of disobedience. It was suffocating, and yet, strangely, it made everything clearer. This wasn't a place I could salvage. This wasn't the clinic I'd built my life around. It was a machine now, and Victor was determined to grind down anything human left inside it. 2 days later, he crossed a line that hardened my decision into something that felt almost feral. I just finished updating medical notes when I opened Daisy's chart, Daisy, the sweet retriever who'd been stable for months, and saw a new administrative entry stamped across the top. Primary veterinarian reassigned, effective immediately. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I checked 3 more charts, same message. Pets I'd cared for since they were pudgy little fluffballs had been stripped from my caseload, as if erasing me from their records could erase what I meant to those families. I felt something inside me go cold. That night, long after closing, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop glowing in the dark and typed an email I never thought I'd write. Request to accelerate launch timeline. Urgent. My attorney responded within minutes. If you're willing to open part-time with temporary equipment, we can be operational in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was all I needed. The next morning, my second to last day, Victor summoned me into the break room, where a new laminated poster was taped to the wall. New FE. Schedule. Effective immediately. Everything was marked up. Vaccines, blood work, even nail trims. But the worst was the wellness bundles, engineered to squeeze every dime out of frightened pet owners. I stood there staring at the list, disgust rising like bile. This wasn't veterinary medicine. This was exploitation wrapped in clinical language. During my first appointment of the day, Mrs. Harmon brought in her senior tabby, Mittens, for a recheck. Mittens had been doing well. She didn't need a $500 panel, but the new script required me to push it. When I explained gently that she could wait, relief softened her shoulders until Victor materialized in the doorway like a phantom. He jumped into the conversation with polished urgency, leaning on words like early risk indicators, preventative protocol, and recommended care tiers. By the time he finished, Mrs. Harmon looked cornered. She sighed, apologized to me for not wanting to seem irresponsible, and agreed to the test. The guilt in her eyes cut me deeper than anything Victor had done so far. After she left, he stepped close enough that I could smell his cologne. Sharp, manufactured, as artificial as his concern. Your reluctance to follow protocol is noted, he said quietly. We can't let individual judgment compromise revenue targets. Medical judgment, I corrected, the thing veterinarians are trained to use. He smiled like I'd made a childish mistake. This clinic is part of a business now. Emotion clouds decision-making. You mean it interferes with profits? I said. For the first time, the mask slipped. Just a flicker, but enough to tell me he wasn't used to being challenged, enough to tell me he was angry. The final blow came the next day at noon. He called me into the conference room for what he called a departure protocol meeting, which sounded too formal for a goodbye but too vague to be harmless. When I walked inside, I saw two people I didn't recognize. A woman in a navy blazer who introduced herself as regional legal counsel, and a stiff HR manager who didn't bother pretending she was happy to be there. Victor folded his hands like a judge preparing a sentence. Before we finalize your departure, he said, we need to address certain concerns. The attorney slid a manila envelope toward me. This is a cease and desist. Under your transition documents, you are prohibited from practicing veterinary medicine within a 20-mile radius for 1 year. My heart should have raced. It didn't. I'd prepared for this. I pulled out my folder, the one I'd been carrying for days, and spread every signed document across the table. There is no non-compete, I said. Not in any of these. My attorney reviewed them yesterday. The legal counsel blinked. HR shifted in her chair. Victor's jaw tightened a fraction. They were bluffing, and now they knew I knew. 2 hours later, we had an agreement. I wouldn't actively solicit Cedar Grove clients for 30 days. In exchange, CareSpan dropped all attempts to restrict where or when I opened my clinic. When I left the room, Victor avoided my eyes. I think that was the moment he realized he'd underestimated me. I walked to my car lighter than I'd felt in months. I'd entered that building as someone trapped. I walked out as someone free, and Victor had no idea what was coming next. The morning after my final shift, I parked outside the old pediatric clinic on Maple Ridge Parkway and sat there for a moment, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, staring at the building that was about to become my lifeline. It didn't look like much. A sun-faded sign frame, peeling trim around the windows, a lobby coated in that shade of beige only medical offices choose. But where Victor saw numbers, I saw potential. I stepped inside with the contractor, and as he walked me through the space, all I could think was how quickly everything was happening. 2 weeks to turn an abandoned shell into something that felt like hope. The days that followed blurred together. I met with equipment reps who agreed to loan me temporary machines because they trusted my reputation. I signed paperwork until my hand cramped. I painted walls, scrubbed sinks, ordered supplies, and built exam tables with Tessa until almost midnight. Amir stopped by after his shifts at Cedar Grove, still wearing his scrubs, helping us unpack boxes while talking through workflow ideas. Every night, I collapsed into bed exhausted but strangely alive, as if the more chaos piled up, the more certain I became that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't advertise. Not publicly, not yet. I only called 20 families, those with pets who needed immediate follow-ups or chronic care. I simply told them I'd be available part-time soon and would update them when I could. But word travels in places where trust runs deep. On opening morning, I arrived 15 minutes early, coffee in hand, expecting a quiet test run. Instead, I froze on the sidewalk, my heart slamming against my ribs. A line of people wrapped around the building, owners with leashes, crates, carriers, even a woman holding a parrot in a blanket. Ruby waved at me from near the front door as if she'd been waiting for the look on my face. It started with 2 families, she said. By the time I got here, there were 20, then 30. I didn't call all these people, I whispered. I hadn't called most of them, but someone had posted on the neighborhood Facebook groups. Someone else spread the word at the dog park. One client told another who told 10 more. It was a chain reaction, fueled not by advertising but by anger. Anger at how Cedar Grove had changed and loyalty to the care they remembered. I stepped inside and nearly choked up. The little lobby glowed with soft light. The new reception desk gleamed, a mirror. Stood beside the exam rooms organizing charts, already in clinician mode. Tessa stocked the treatment shelves with practiced efficiency. It wasn't perfect. Half our equipment was borrowed, some rooms still smelled like fresh paint, and one of the computers rebooted every time someone breathed on it. But it was real. It was ours. The doors opened and the day exploded into motion. Pets poured in. Beagles, ferrets, retrievers, anxious chihuahuas wearing sweaters knitted with love. Some clients brought flowers, others brought cookies. One family brought an entire slow cooker of chili because you're going to be slammed. They weren't wrong. By noon, we'd registered over 70 patients. By closing time, the number had doubled. And while we worked nonstop, my phone buzzed with messages from friends still inside Cedar Grove. "Emergency meeting," one texted. "No appointments all day," said another. "Victor is losing it." I paused midway through cleaning a stethoscope, letting the truth sink in. They weren't coming to me because of the shiny new clinic. They were coming because they refused to follow someone who treated them like transactions. They came because they chose me. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was finally winning. By the end of our first month, Summit Ridge Veterinary Center looked nothing like the quiet part-time operation I had imagined. We were booked solid from open to close, our voicemail overflowing with appointment requests, our supply orders doubling each week. It was exhausting, beautifully exhausting. Every morning as I walked through the door with my coffee, I felt a surge of gratitude mixed with something sharper, something fiercer. This wasn't just a clinic anymore. It was proof. Proof that compassion outlives corporations. Proof that people follow heart over policy. But the real confirmation arrived in a single message from an old coworker. "Victor just announced an emergency task force meeting. Client numbers dropped more than 70%. I stared at my phone, the hum of the clinic buzzing around me, Amir laughing with a client, Tessa soothing a nervous puppy, Ruby scheduling appointments faster than she could type. 70%. Those weren't numbers. Those were families who had chosen integrity over pressure. Every one of them had sent a message Victor couldn't ignore. A few days later, I looked up from my desk and froze. Standing in my lobby was Dr. Whitford, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket, eyes softened with pride. "I had to see it myself," he said. I walked him through the entire clinic, each exam room, the surgery suite we'd refurbished with loaned equipment, the tiny break room where we huddled for 10-minute lunches. Clients stopped him constantly, saying how much they missed him but how relieved they were to have a place that felt honest again. When we reached the end of the hallway, he turned to me with a look I'll never forget. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have sold to them. I should have asked you first." I shook my head. "You deserved your retirement, and I needed the push." He smiled, eyes bright. "Well, you built something better than what we had." That night, after closing, I finally checked my email. Sitting at the top of my inbox was a message from Victor Brandt. Subject line, "Discussion request, market shifts in Boulder." I opened it slowly. His message was formal, stiff, wrapped in polite corporate language about collaborative possibilities and industry trends affecting clinic sustainability. It didn't take a translator to understand the real meaning. He wanted a lifeline. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet satisfaction settle. Months earlier, he had sliced my pay without hesitation, dismissed my value with a sentence, and tried to erase me from the very place I'd helped build. Now he wanted a meeting. I typed my reply carefully. "I'm available next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Nothing personal, just business." When I hit send, the weight I'd carried for months finally loosened. I closed my laptop and stepped into the lobby, where the soft evening sun warmed the front windows. Amir was double-checking inventory. Tessa was finishing charts. Ruby was setting up the next day's schedule. A golden retriever snored gently under a chair while his owner read a magazine. The world I'd built, a world rooted in trust, not fear, was alive around me. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Steady, unshakable pride. Corporate took everything they could from me: security, stability, the illusion that loyalty protected me. But what they gave me, without meaning to, was far more valuable. They pushed me toward the life I was meant to build. So if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or treated like a replaceable line item, hear me clearly. You're not powerless. I wasn't. And when someone treats you like you don't matter, sometimes the best revenge is simply proving how much you always did. When I look back on everything that happened, what stays with me isn't the corporate cruelty or the pay cut or even the humiliation. It's the reminder that sometimes the universe gives you a shove when you refuse to walk away on your own. I learned that loyalty is a gift, not a contract, and when someone abuses it, you're allowed to reclaim it without apology. I realized how easy it is to lose yourself in a place that stops seeing your value, and how powerful it feels to choose yourself again. And yes, Victor faced consequences, but that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was discovering that I had more strength, more support, and more purpose than I ever imagined. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. By walking away without begging for fairness, I forced him to sit with the reality he created. This story isn't just about veterinary clinics or corporate greed. It's about anyone who's ever been underestimated, overworked, or treated as replaceable. It's about remembering that we don't have to stay in places that ask us to shrink. Whether you work in healthcare, retail, tech, or anywhere else, the lesson is the same. Your integrity is worth more than any paycheck, and your peace is worth more than any title. How to get started today. Write down 3 things you value that your job can't take from you. Identify one boundary you need to strengthen this week. Reach out to someone who believes in you. They might remind you who you are. Take one small step toward a dream you've been putting off, even if it's just research. And if you've ever lived through something like this, if you've ever walked away from a place that didn't see your worth, share your story in the comments. Subscribe, pass this along, and let's support each other in choosing better.